After my dad passed, my neighbor and my half-brother tried to convince the court that I was unstable and needed supervision so they could control my inheritance. They lied, faked documents, even hired a psychologist to diagnose me without ever meeting me. I fought back hard, and when their lies unraveled, the judge ordered criminal charges against them both. I watched them get arrested in the courthouse lobby, screaming it was all just a misunderstanding. My dad, George Hartley, passed away last April in Nashville. He was 67. Kidney failure. I was there with him at the end. Held his hand while the machines beeped slower and slower. It was just me and him for most of my life. My mom left when I was 7. Dad raised me alone. Never remarried. Never complained. He worked overtime at the steel plant, then later as a property manager when his body couldn't handle physical labor anymore. He wasn't a millionaire, but he was smart with money. Bought up land cheap outside of town back in the early 90s, thinking Nashville would expand. It did. By the time he passed, he had 5 acres, a house, and several rental properties. His will was clear. Everything went to me. Not because he loved me more than anyone else, but because I was the one who took care of him, who was there. He and I talked about it openly. The only other family was Corey, my half-brother. Dad had him young, during a short relationship before he even met my mom. Corey and Dad never really bonded. Corey lived with his mom in Ohio most of his life. They reconnected a few years ago, but it was always distant. Holiday cards, occasional phone calls. When Dad told me he wasn't putting Corey in the will, he said, "It's not about love or fairness. It's about who stood by me." I thought that was the end of it. After Dad's funeral, things went quiet for a while. Too quiet. I remember standing in Dad's backyard one humid night, hearing the cicadas, thinking the worst was behind me. About a month later, I got a letter. At first, I thought it was just another utility bill or estate paperwork. But when I opened it, my heart sank. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. It said Corey and a man named Rick Delaney were petitioning the court to have me declared mentally unfit to handle the estate. Rick Delaney was my neighbor. He'd lived next door to Dad for years. Older guy, gray beard, always offering to mow the lawn or help out. I thought he was just a friendly neighbor. Apparently, he and Corey had teamed up. The letter said they were seeking to have the court appoint Rick as my conservator. Their argument? That I was unstable, prone to delusions, and a danger to myself and others. Attached was a psychologist's report diagnosing me with delusional disorder and paranoid personality traits. Problem was, I had never met that psychologist. Ever. My first reaction was pure panic. Was this even real? Could they just say these things and have the court believe them? I called a few lawyers. Most told me probate fights were messy and expensive. Some even hinted I should think about settling. Then I found Bethany Cruz. Bethany was a shark. Early 40s. Wore simple suits. Looked like she hadn't smiled since the late 90s. She listened carefully, then said, "They're trying to railroad you. But they've made mistakes already. Let's catch them." Bethany reviewed the psychologist's report. She spotted red flags instantly. My name was misspelled in 2 places. My middle name was wrong. It mentioned 2 past psychiatric hospitalizations, which never happened. The psychologist's signature looked inconsistent. We subpoenaed the psychologist, Dr. Stephen White. While waiting for his response, Bethany dug into the character witness statements Corey and Rick submitted. 3 people supposedly vouched for me being unstable. Bethany hired a private investigator. Turned out those witnesses didn't exist. Their addresses led to either vacant lots or commercial buildings. Completely fake. Then Dr. White replied to the subpoena. His response was simple and brutal. He never met me. Never wrote the report. His letterhead had been stolen. He attached an affidavit swearing the report was forged. Bethany filed an emergency motion with the court to dismiss the petition and asked the judge to open a fraud investigation. In the meantime, Corey and Rick tried to delay the hearing multiple times, claiming they needed more time. I think they knew the walls were closing in. But the judge, Judge Kearns, wasn't having it. She set a firm date. The day of the hearing, I walked into the Davidson County Probate Court building feeling like I was walking to my own funeral. Corey sat at one table. Expensive suit. His hair slicked back. Fake calm on his face. Rick sat beside him, dressed like a small-town preacher. Smiling like he still thought he had this in the bag. I sat with Bethany. She had a binder 2 inches thick labeled, Evidence. The judge came in. No nonsense. Early 60s. Glasses low on her nose. Bethany spoke first. Calm. Direct. She laid out the forged psychological report. The fake character witnesses. The financial motive. Rick and Corey stood to gain hundreds of thousands if I was ruled incompetent. Then Dr. White took the stand. He confirmed every word of Bethany's claims. His signature was forged. His letter had stolen. He'd never evaluated me or written any report. Finally, Bethany called the private investigator to explain how the witnesses were fabricated. I watched Corey's face go pale. Rick just kept shaking his head like he couldn't believe we'd uncovered it all. After both sides spoke, the judge didn't even ask for a recess. She said, "The evidence of fraud and perjury is overwhelming." She dismissed their petition with prejudice, meaning they couldn't try again. Then, looking directly at Rick and Corey, she said, "This court refers both of you for immediate criminal prosecution for forgery, fraud upon the court, perjury, and conspiracy to commit financial abuse." 2 deputies walked over. Rick stood up and started protesting. "This is all a misunderstanding," Corey shouted. "I'm family. You can't do this to family." The deputies didn't flinch. Handcuffs. Click. Click. They were led out of the courtroom while still yelling. I just sat there shaking. After the hearing, I didn't go home right away. I just sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot, staring at the steering wheel. They were really gone. But the relief didn't last long. Within 2 days, my phone started blowing up. Blocked numbers. Private numbers. Some left voicemails. Others just hung up. The messages were almost always the same. "You ruined their lives. They just wanted what was fair. This wasn't necessary." Turns out, Corey had friends and even distant relatives I'd never met who believed his version of the story, that I'd set them up and overreacted. I ignored it at first. Then came the vandalism. One morning, I woke up to find the side of my dad's house spray-painted. "Liar, thief, crazy," I reported it to the police. They took photos but said without witnesses or cameras, there wasn't much they could do. Bethany, my lawyer, told me to stay calm and document everything. They're desperate. Desperate people get sloppy. She was right. About 3 weeks after the courtroom arrests, Bethany called me. "We found something," she said. Her team had subpoenaed Corey and Rick's financial records. While most people focused on the forgery and fraud charges, Bethany dug deeper. She found 2 secret bank accounts in Corey's name, and Rick's name was listed as an authorized user. The accounts had over $47,000 between them. Money that had been quietly withdrawn from the estate's rental properties before Dad's death, when Corey had briefly convinced Dad to let him help with the books. Bethany cross-referenced the withdrawals. Dates matched times Corey claimed to be visiting Dad just to reconnect. "They weren't just trying to steal from you after your dad passed," Bethany said. "They were already stealing while he was alive." This changed everything. Now it wasn't just attempted fraud. It was theft, embezzlement, elder financial abuse. Bethany immediately notified the district attorney's office. They added the new charges to Rick and Corey's already heavy list. A few days later, a beat-up sedan started parking across from my house. Same car. Every night. Didn't matter if it was midnight or 3 a.m. Bethany warned me. It might be someone trying to intimidate you. I started carrying a small voice recorder and installed a basic security camera pointed at the street. I also moved Dad's important documents and personal items to a safe deposit box at the bank. Then one night, the driver of that car got bold. I heard gravel crunching in the driveway around 2 a.m. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and flipped on the porch lights. By the time I got outside, the car peeled out. But they left something behind. A piece of paper taped to my mailbox. You'll regret this. We all make mistakes. The next morning, something surprising happened. A woman named Teresa knocked on my door. I recognized her vaguely. She'd once dated Corey years ago. She looked nervous, kept glancing over her shoulder. I can't stay long, she said. But you need to know something. Teresa admitted Corey had been bragging before the hearing. He told her and some of his buddies that they were locking down the inheritance and that I'd be out of the way soon. He even joked about the Psychologist report, saying, "It doesn't matter if she's crazy. We'll have the papers to prove it." She also mentioned that Corey and Rick had a third person helping them with the forged documents. I don't know his real name, she whispered, but Corey called him Doc. A chill ran down my spine. Bethany's team had been so focused on Rick and Corey, we hadn't even considered a third conspirator. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Teresa swallowed hard. Because Corey tried to get me to say you were unstable if the case went to trial. He offered me $5,000. I said no. But now, I think he's getting out soon. They posted bail. That night I barely slept. If Corey and Rick were out on bail, and if there was a third man involved, this wasn't over. Bethany confirmed the next morning, Rick and Corey had both posted bail. But don't worry, she said. With the added charges, they can't run far. Still, I could feel something boiling just under the surface. Bethany moved fast. She requested a court order restricting Rick and Corey from contacting me, coming within 300 feet of my home, or attempting to interfere with the estate. They already broke the law once, she told me. If they violate this, they go straight back to jail. But even Bethany didn't know about the third man. Not yet. Bethany's team dug hard into Teresa's tip. We cross-referenced Corey's phone records while he was in jail before posting bail. There were multiple calls to a number registered to a Dr. Malcolm R. Owens. Bethany's paralegal almost dropped the phone when she looked up the name. Doc wasn't a psychologist. He wasn't licensed for anything anymore. He'd lost his license 10 years ago for, get this, fraudulently creating psychiatric evaluations in custody battles. This was the man who Rick and Corey hired to forge the Psychologist report, under Dr. Stephen White's stolen letterhead. Bethany immediately passed this to the DA. They were already livid over the forged documents, but now, with a professional fraudster in the mix, it became a full-blown criminal conspiracy case. Warrants were issued for Malcolm Owens. By the time fall came around, I felt like I was living in a movie. Corey kept violating the restraining order. I'd see him driving past the house slowly, making sure I saw him. Once, he left an old family photo in my mailbox. A younger version of him and me, from some birthday party decades ago. Like that would guilt me into backing down. Instead, Bethany filed to revoke his bail. The hearing was set for October. That day, the courtroom was packed. News reporters were even there. Word had spread about the fake diagnosis, the forged documents, and the property theft. The DA didn't waste time. They laid out everything, Corey and Rick's financial theft before Dad's death. The fake mental health report created by Malcolm Owens. The attempt to illegally seize control of my inheritance. The intimidation, harassment, and restraining order violations. Then they produced a bombshell. Bank statements showing Corey had already spent most of the stolen money, gambling and paying off personal debts. Rick, meanwhile, had transferred thousands to an account in his girlfriend's name. She was also charged with aiding and abetting. Then the DA called Teresa to testify. When she walked into that courtroom, Corey's face froze. He didn't know she'd turned. She told the court everything he'd said about locking me away and paying witnesses to lie. By the time she finished, you could hear a pin drop. Judge Kearns looked directly at Corey and Rick. I have seen many schemes in this courtroom. Yours ranks among the most heartless. She didn't just revoke bail. She remanded both of them into custody immediately, pending trial, and added additional charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, elder financial abuse, witness tampering, and harassment. You will await your trial behind bars, she said. As deputies moved in, Corey stood up, shouting, It was just a misunderstanding. I just wanted my fair share. Rick started sobbing, saying he was too old for prison and had been manipulated by Corey. Neither of them even looked at me. They were cuffed and led out of the room. The criminal trial moved quickly. Rick pleaded guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. Corey tried to fight it. Claimed he was duped by Rick. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 5 years. Malcolm Owens, the fake doc, was also arrested. He took a plea deal and got 3 years. Bethany helped me file civil suits against all 3. The court awarded me judgments, though I knew I'd never see most of the money. That was fine by me. The criminal convictions mattered more. The inheritance stayed intact. The land my dad loved remained mine. I set up the rental income to fund a local scholarship in Dad's name. Something he'd once told me he wanted. A few months after the trial, I got one last letter. From Corey. It was handwritten. Rambling. Apologetic. Blamed Rick and Owens. Claimed he'd been desperate and scared, and that he hoped someday I could forgive him. I folded the letter once. Tossed it into the fireplace. I'd already forgiven one person in my life, my mother, for walking out when I was a kid. I didn't have room in my heart for forgiving people who tried to destroy me for money. Sometimes people say, family is family, no matter what. That's a lie. Family are the people who stand by you. The rest? They're just strangers who happen to share your blood. And I watched 2 of those strangers get handcuffed and dragged away, screaming about misunderstandings, while I walked out of that courthouse with my head held high.